They laughed at me again that morning, said I was visiting a stranger. I heard them from across the cemetery path, two women from church, whispering behind their hands like teenagers passing notes in Sunday school. One pointed at the flowers in my arms, yellow chrysanthemums wrapped in brown paper tied with kitchen twine. The other shook her head, that slow, pitying shake people reserve for the confused elderly or lost children. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Cole. I knew their names, knew their grandchildren's names, knew which pew they sat in every Sunday, third row left, always arriving 15 minutes early to claim their spot. I didn't turn around. I've learned that dignity doesn't answer mockery, it just keeps walking. The gravel crunched under my shoes, the same worn black flats I've had for 12 years. The leather's gone soft at the toes, molded to the shape of my feet and the shape of this path. 12 years of walking these same 53 steps every third Sunday, rain or August heat, or the kind of spring morning that makes your bones remember what it felt like to be young. The sun was low that morning, the kind of golden October light that makes everything look like an old photograph. Long shadows stretched between the headstones, dark fingers reaching across names carved in granite and marble. I could smell the fresh-cut grass mingling with the faint sweetness of magnolia from the tree near the chapel, the one that blooms twice a year like it can't quite decide when to let go. My knees ached the way they always do when the weather's about to change, but I kept my back straight, shoulders squared. My mother taught me that. "Walk like you own the ground you're standing on, Evelyn May," she used to say. Even if you don't, especially if you don't. When I reached the grave, I knelt slowly, feeling the dampness seep through my stockings. The earth here never quite dries, even in drought. It holds moisture like it's holding memory. The cross was still there, weathered pine wood, leaning slightly to the left, like an old man favoring his good hip. No name, no dates. No beloved husband or cherished mother, just a cross that looked like it might blow away in the next storm, held in place by nothing but habit and the weight of forgotten roots. I placed the flowers at the base, arranging them the way I always do, gently, with care, fanning them out so each bloom catches light. My hands moved in the pattern they'd learned over a decade, a ritual I could perform in my sleep. Behind me, Mrs. Henderson's voice carried on the morning air, stage whisper loud. She's doing it again. 12 years now, visiting nobody. Someone should talk to her daughter about this. It's not healthy. I smoothed my skirt and stood up, feeling my knees protest, hearing the small click in my left hip that's been there since I turned 60. At my age, I don't bring flowers for the dead. I bring them for the truth. And the truth has been waiting here, nameless and patient, for 58 years. Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. The cross has been nameless for as long as I've known it exists. When I first found this grave, it was spring of 2008. I was 52 years old, standing in this same cemetery 3 days after my mother's funeral, wandering between stones because I couldn't bear to go home yet, couldn't bear to walk into that empty house that still smelled like her, Jergens lotion and Folger's coffee and the lavender sachets she kept in every drawer. The funeral had been small, just family, and a handful of church ladies who came to every service, professional mourners in floral prints and sensible shoes. Claudette, my older sister, had cried loudly at the graveside, dramatic sobs that seemed calculated for the audience. I'd stood there dry-eyed, holding a single white rose, feeling nothing but a strange hollowness. It wasn't that I didn't love my mother. It was that I didn't know if I'd ever really known her. That's when I saw it. The wooden cross, half hidden behind a newer headstone, a glossy black granite marker for someone named Ethel Patterson, beloved wife and mother, 1931-2007. The cross was smaller, simpler, nearly swallowed by the shadow of Ethel's eternal declaration of belovedness. No flowers, no visits, no weathered teddy bear or plastic flag or faded photograph in a frame. Just a patch of earth that looked forgotten, a rectangle of grass that grew different from the rest, darker green, like something underneath was feeding it in ways the other plots weren't fed. I asked the groundskeeper that day, an old man named Leonard Petty, whose grave it was. He was raking leaves near the chapel, moving slowly, methodically, like a man who'd learned to make peace with repetitive work. He scratched his head when I pointed to the cross, his weathered face creasing into deeper lines. That one? He squinted. Don't rightly know. Been here since before my time, maybe the 70s or 80s. Records from back then are a mess. Fire in 82 took out half the filing cabinets. Some things just got lost. But someone's buried there. Oh, sure. Plot's occupied. Just don't know by who. He leaned on his rake, considering. Probably a transient, someone without family. Used to happen more back then. Folks passing through, dying with nothing. Church would bury them, mark the spot, move on. But something about that cross bothered me. Not the lack of a name. Plenty of old graves had weathered markers you couldn't read anymore. It was something else. The way it leaned. The way the wood had weathered but never rotted, like it was made of something harder than it looked. The way it seemed to be waiting, patient as stone, for someone to notice it was there. I started bringing flowers a month later, after I'd cleaned out my mother's house and found the envelope. I told myself it was charity, that someone should remember, even if I didn't know who I was remembering, that every soul deserves flowers, even nameless ones. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was in the envelope I'd found 3 weeks earlier, tucked inside my mother's Bible in the bottom drawer of her dresser. The envelope with the faded lilac pattern, the kind they used to sell at the 5 and dime for a nickel. The envelope that smelled like old paper and broken promises. The envelope with the letter inside, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Careful, almost childlike, like someone trying very hard to be understood. The letter that began, "I'm sorry, I couldn't give him a name." I stood there now, looking at the cross, and felt the weight of 12 years pressing on my chest like a hand. Leonard Petty had retired 5 years ago, moved to Florida to live with his daughter. The new groundskeeper, a young man named Marcus, who couldn't be more than 25, didn't know the history, didn't know what this place had buried, what secrets the earth here held in its damp keeping. But I did. And I was starting to understand that some truths don't stay buried forever, that they wait, patient as wood and stone, until someone with enough stubborn love comes looking. My mother died on a Tuesday in April, just after Easter, when the dogwoods were blooming and the world was pretending at resurrection. She went quietly, the way she lived. No fuss, no drama, no last-minute declarations or deathbed confessions. Just a slow fade in the hospital bed while the machines beeped their steady rhythm and the nurses whispered in the hallway about their boyfriends and their rent. I held her hand for 3 hours. She didn't squeeze back. By then, she was already somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't follow, slipping away like smoke through an open window. The house smelled wrong when I came back to clean it out, like lavender and old paper and something else underneath, the particular staleness of a place where someone has stopped living but hasn't quite finished dying. The clocks had all stopped at different times. The plants had wilted. The mail had piled up in a basket by the door, mostly bills and church newsletters and catalogs for things she'd never buy. My sister Claudette said she'd help me sort through everything, but she never showed. Called the morning I'd planned to start and said she was too busy with her own family, her voice tight with an excuse I'd heard 1,000 times before. Mama wouldn't want us crying over old junk, she said. Just donate it. Keep what matters. But she never said what mattered. So I did it alone, the way I do most things. Started in the bedroom because that felt right. The most private space. The place where people keep their softest truths. I pulled open drawers that hadn't been touched in years, running my hands through accumulated time. Scarves that still smelled like her perfume. White shoulders, the same scent she'd worn since 1965. Handkerchiefs with embroidered initials. DWB, Dorothy Wright Briggs. A tin of buttons. Mismatched orphans waiting to be reunited with lost shirts and dresses. A half-empty bottle of arthritis medication. A broken watch. A recipe card for sweet potato pie written in my grandmother's hand. And then, at the very bottom of the dresser, beneath a stack of church bulletins from 1998 and a bundle of sympathy cards from when my stepfather died, I found the envelope. It was pale purple, the color of a fading bruise. The edges were soft with age, furry almost, like fabric. The flap had been tucked in, not sealed, The kind of closing that says, I might need to open this again. My mother's name was written on the front in the same careful handwriting that was inside. Just one word, Evelyn. My name. My hands shook as I pulled out the single sheet of paper, folded twice with sharp creases. The handwriting was careful, almost childlike. Each letter formed with the precision of someone who didn't trust their hand to be steady. The ink had faded to brown, the color of old blood or weak tea. Dear Evelyn, I'm sorry I couldn't give him a name. I'm sorry I couldn't keep him. I'm sorry you'll read this after I'm gone and think I was a coward. Maybe I was. But I want you to know, he was real. He was born April 14th, 1958, at County General, and he lived 4 years. 4 years of trying to breathe right, of fevers that wouldn't break and silence that wouldn't end. 4 years of watching him struggle while the doctors shook their heads and your father looked away. Your father never claimed him, said it would ruin us, said people would talk, said I'd be ruined and you girls would suffer for it. So I let them take him when he died. I let them bury him without a stone. I let them erase him like he was a mistake that never happened. His name was James Marshall. He had your father's eyes, that pale gray blue like winter sky. He had my hands. He had a birthmark on his left shoulder shaped like a crescent moon. I held him when he died. He was 4 years and 58 days old. I'm sorry. Mama. I sat on the floor for an hour, maybe 2, holding that letter, reading it over and over until the words blurred and my eyes burned and my legs went numb from sitting cross-legged on the hardwood. James Marshall. I had a brother, and my mother had buried him twice, once in the ground, once in silence. I went to the county clerk's office the next week, the letter folded in my purse like a secret too heavy to carry alone, too dangerous to leave behind. The building was old, red brick with white columns, the kind of small-town courthouse that looks like it hasn't changed since 1952. Inside, it smelled like floor wax and copy machine toner, and the particular mustiness of old documents slowly turning to dust in their filing cabinets. The woman at the desk was young, maybe 30, with bright red nails and box braids pulled back in a professional ponytail. Her name tag said Shanice Williams in neat letters. She smiled when I walked up, the kind of genuine smile that said she actually liked her job, liked helping people find things. Good morning. How can I help you? I'm looking for a birth certificate, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. James Marshall, born April 14th, 1958. She typed into her computer, her red nails clicking against the keys in a steady rhythm. Click, 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 pause, click. Then her eyes narrowed slightly, focused on the screen. She frowned. Typed again, slower this time. Scrolled down, scrolled back up. Marshall with 2 L's? Yes. And you're sure about the date? April 14th, 1958? I'm certain. She turned the monitor toward me so I could see. The screen showed a list of births from April 1958, 12 names, all with dates and times, all with registration numbers and parents' names. But no James Marshall. The list jumped from Janie Mae Hutchins on April 13th to Jerome Anthony Patterson on April 15th. April 14th was empty. Could it be under a different last name? She asked, her voice gentle, like she was used to helping people find relatives who'd changed names or been adopted. I hesitated. My mother's maiden name was Wright. My father's name was Briggs. But the letter said Marshall, the name of my mother's first husband, the man she'd married at 18 and divorced at 22. The man we never talked about. The ghost marriage that existed only in legal documents and sealed records. Try Marshall Wright, I said. Or Wright Marshall. She typed both combinations. Scrolled. Shook her head slowly, her expression shifting to something like concern. I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no record of that name in 1958. Not in April, not any month. Are you sure about the year? Could it be 1957 or 1959? No. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. The year is right. The date is right. He was born April 14th, 1958, at County General Hospital. She bit her lip, thinking. Let me check the hospital records. Sometimes if a birth wasn't registered properly with the county, there's still a hospital record. She picked up her phone, dialed an extension, had a quiet conversation with someone. Waited. Wrote something down. Hung up. They don't have anything either. No admission records for that date under those names. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, spreading outward like ice water. What does that mean? She lowered her voice, glancing toward the back office where an older woman was filing papers. Sometimes records from that era got misfiled, or lost in the fire we had in '82. A lot of stuff from the 50s and 60s just disappeared. But also, she hesitated. If a baby died young, sometimes families didn't complete the paperwork, especially if the birth was complicated. Complicated. You know. She met my eyes, and I saw understanding there. If the parents weren't married, or if there were other circumstances, sometimes things didn't get recorded officially. Complicated meant unwanted. Complicated meant shameful. Complicated meant erased. I thanked her and left, my hands shaking as I pushed open the heavy glass door into the parking lot. The sun was too bright, aggressive in its cheerfulness. The air felt too thin. My chest was tight. Somewhere in a dusty file cabinet, or a torn ledger, or a burned document, my brother had existed. His birth had been real. His life had been real. But the county had no proof, and that meant someone had made sure of it. Someone had chosen to make him disappear. I found the photograph 3 days later, in a shoebox at the back of my mother's closet, behind the winter coats that still smelled like mothballs and her perfume. The box was unmarked, plain cardboard, the kind shoes come in from department stores. It had been shoved behind a stack of old quilts and a broken sewing machine that had probably been broken since 1985. I almost didn't open it, almost threw it in the donation pile with everything else. But something made me hesitate, made me lift the lid just to be sure. Inside were 30 or 40 photographs, most of them black and white, curled at the edges from humidity and time. Pictures of my mother as a young woman, maybe 21 or 22, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, a shotgun shack with a sagging porch and chickens in the yard. She looked impossibly young, impossibly thin, wearing a dress that was too big for her and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Pictures of my father in his army uniform, 1956, serious and unsmiling, his face hard even in youth. Pictures of Claudette and me as children, maybe 5 and 3 years old, dressed in matching Easter dresses that were probably hand-me-downs, standing in front of the Baptist church with our hair in careful braids. Pictures of people I didn't know, cousins maybe, or neighbors, faces frozen in moments I'd never witnessed. And then, at the very bottom, beneath all the others, a photograph I'd never seen before. A little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old, sitting on a porch step. The same porch from the earlier photos. I recognized the warped boards, the metal milk box beside the door. He wore shorts and a white shirt, too big for his thin frame, hanging off his shoulders like he was swimming in it. His hair was dark and curly, uncombed. His feet were bare, dirty at the toes. His eyes were light, pale, like winter sky, like my father's eyes, like my own. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired, like a child who'd been sick too long, who'd forgotten what it felt like to have energy to play. His hands rested on his knees, small and still. On the back, in pencil, faded but still legible. J.M., Summer 1961. I held the photo under the bedside lamp, studying his face with the kind of attention archaeologists give to fragments. The curve of his jaw, the shape of his nose, the way his eyes tilted slightly at the corners, the particular way his mouth turned down, not in sadness, but in that neutral expression children have when they're not performing for cameras. He looked like my father. Too much like my father not to be his son. But more than that, he looked like me, in the shape of his face, the set of his eyes. He looked like Claudette. He looked like family. I sat down on the edge of my mother's bed, the photo trembling in my hands. The mattress sagged in the middle from years of her sleeping alone. The comforter was the same one she'd had since 1990, faded and pilled. This was James. This was the boy my mother had let them bury without a name. The boy she'd carried for 9 months and loved for 4 years, and then tried to forget so hard that she'd hidden even his photographs, tucked them away where no one would find them, where even she might forget they existed. I traced my finger over his face, careful not to smudge the image, as if my touch could somehow reach back across decades and let him know someone finally saw him. "I see you," I whispered to the empty room. "I see you, James." And for the first time in 12 years of leaving flowers at that nameless grave, I knew for certain who I was remembering. I called Claudette that night, after I'd stared at the photograph for 2 hours and cried until my eyes were swollen. She answered on the third ring, her voice distracted, harried. I could hear her grandchildren in the background, shouting and laughing, someone crying, a television playing too loud. She told one of them to go outside, her voice sharp, then sighed into the phone. "What is it, Evelyn? I'm in the middle of making dinner." I didn't waste time on small talk. We'd never been good at that anyway. "Did you know Mama had another child?" The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it, the kind that presses down on a conversation like a hand. Then, "What are you talking about?" "A boy, James Marshall, born in 1958, died in 1962. I kept my voice steady, factual. "I found a letter and a photograph." More silence. I heard her breathing, sharp and uneven, like she was deciding something. Then I heard a door close, the background noise suddenly muffled. "Where did you hear that name?" Not what name, not who. Where did you hear it? Like she already knew. "I found it in Mama's things, a letter addressed to me. She wrote it before she died." "Evelyn, don't." Her voice turned hard, tight, that particular tone she uses when she's made up her mind and doesn't want to be challenged. "Don't go digging into things that don't concern you. He was our brother. He wasn't anything." She said it fast, automatic, like she'd been practicing that line for years. "Mama made a mistake before she married Daddy. She fixed it. That's all. That's the end of it." "Fixed it?" My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. "He was a child, Claudette. He lived, he breathed, he died, and they buried him like he never existed. How is that fixing anything?" "Because that's what you did back then." She was shouting now, that particular frustrated shout of someone who's defending something they don't fully believe in. "You think it was easy for Mama? Being divorced, having a sick child, no money, no support? You think people were kind about that? They would have destroyed her, destroyed all of us. So she destroyed him instead. She survived," Claudette's voice cracked. "She survived, and she gave us a good life, and she protected us from shame. And now you want to dig him up? Put his name on a grave? Make everyone talk about it? Make Mama look like what? Like she was human? Like she made a mistake and couldn't live with it?" "Like a liar," Claudette said quietly. "Like someone who erased her own child." "She was that," I said. "And so were we. We let him disappear. We never asked questions. Because there was nothing to ask." She was crying now, angry tears that made her words thick. "He was gone before I was even born. Mama never talked about him. Daddy never mentioned him. What was I supposed to do? Remember him now?" "No." The word was final, hard. "No, Evelyn. You do what you want with your flowers and your guilt, but don't expect me to join you. Some secrets stay buried because they deserve to." She hung up. I sat there in the dark kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the distance between us widen into something that might never close. Claudette had always been like that, loyal to the family story, no matter how false it was. She'd learned it from Mama. Keep quiet. Keep moving. Keep the picture perfect, even if you have to crop people out. But I wasn't like them. I'd spent too many years swallowing silence, too many years making myself smaller so other people could be comfortable. And I was done. James deserved more than silence. He deserved his name. My stepfather died 6 years after my mother, in the middle of a thunderstorm that knocked out power across 3 counties. I didn't cry at his funeral. I stood in the back of the church, watching people file past his casket, saying the things people always say. He was a good man. He loved his family. He's in a better place now. I nodded when they looked at me. I shook hands when they offered them. I accepted casseroles wrapped in foil, promises to pray for me, condolences that felt rehearsed and empty. But I didn't cry, because I remembered something. A memory I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself it wasn't real. It was 1989, late summer, the kind of thick heat that makes breathing feel like work. I was 33 years old, married to a man who would leave me 2 years later, visiting my parents for the weekend because Mama had asked, and I still believed that when your mother asks, you go. My stepfather, we called him Daddy, though he'd married my mother when I was 7 and I'd never quite felt like he was mine, was out on the porch, drinking sweet tea from a mason jar and listening to a baseball game on the radio. His territory, his time, his ritual. I was inside, helping Mama with the dishes, my hands in warm, soapy water, when the phone rang. She dried her hands on her apron and answered it, her back to me. Hello? Then her voice changed, went tight, small, the way it used to sound when she was scared. I told you not to call here, she said. I stopped washing, my hands still in the water, listening. No, I can't. It's done. It's been done for years. A pause. Please don't. Her voice cracked. Please. She hung up, her hand shaking as she placed the receiver back in its cradle. When she turned around, she saw me watching. Her face went pale, bloodless. Who was that? I asked. Nobody. The lie came fast, automatic. Wrong number. Mama, it was a wrong number, Evelyn. She said it sharp, final, the way you close a door and lock it. But I saw the way she gripped the counter, the way her hands trembled, the way she looked toward the porch where my stepfather sat, unaware, his life uncomplicated by ghosts and buried sons. Later that night, after I'd gone to bed in my childhood room, I heard them arguing. Their bedroom was directly below mine, and sound traveled through the old floorboards. Their voices were low, muffled, but I caught fragments. Told you it was handled. He's asking questions. After all this time. The boy. And then my stepfather's voice, cold and final as a closing door. If you bring him up again, I'm done. You hear me? Done. I didn't sign up for this. Silence. Then my mother's voice, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I'm sorry. The next morning, Mama was cheerful. She made biscuits and gravy, my favorite. She smiled. She asked about my job, my marriage, my plans for the fall. She never mentioned the phone call, never mentioned the argument, and I never asked. Because that's what we did in my family. We swallowed questions. We smiled through silences. We protected each other from truths that might require us to change. But now, standing at his funeral, listening to people praise a man who'd given my mother an ultimatum. Forget your dead son, or lose me. I wondered how many other secrets he'd buried, how many times he'd told her to choose, how many times she'd chosen him over truth. The storm outside rattled the church windows, thunder so loud it drowned out the organist playing Amazing Grace. And I thought of James, alone in the ground for 52 years, with no name to call him by, no one to mourn him, no one to say his life mattered. Until now. Marcus found me at the grave on a Sunday in October, the air sharp with the smell of wood smoke and dying leaves. He was young, maybe 25, with kind brown eyes and dirt perpetually under his fingernails. The kind of young man who still believed work meant something, who took pride in keeping the cemetery neat, who trimmed grass around headstones with care instead of efficiency. He carried a notebook, the spiral kind you buy at the dollar store, its cover bent from being shoved in his back pocket. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, hesitant, stopping a few feet away like he was afraid to interrupt something sacred. "You come here a lot, don't you?" I nodded, brushing grass from my knees. "Every few weeks, more often when I can." He glanced at the cross, at the flowers I'd just placed. White roses this time, because they'd been on sale and because their simplicity felt right. "Can I ask, who's buried here?" The question I'd been waiting for. The question I'd been dreading. "I don't know," I said. It wasn't quite a lie. I knew his name, but I didn't know his whole story. Didn't know if he'd liked music, or if he'd been afraid of dogs, or if he'd had a favorite toy. Marcus shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "The thing is, I've been going through the old records, trying to update the cemetery map, make sure everything's accurate. And this grave doesn't match anything in the system." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" He opened the notebook, flipping to a page covered in grid lines and numbers, a hand-drawn map of the cemetery sections. See, every plot has a code. This section is H, and the plots are numbered. This one should be H17 according to the location. But in the old logbook from 1962, H17 is listed as a provisional burial. Provisional? It means temporary, like they were planning to move the body later. Sometimes families did that, buried someone fast because they had to, then moved them to a family plot later, or to another cemetery. He ran his finger down the page. But there's no follow-up, no transfer record, no notation saying where the body went. It's like they just stopped keeping track. I stared at the cross, my throat tight. What else does it say? He hesitated, then read from the notebook, his voice careful. Infant male, age 4, interred June 15th, 1962 at family request. Marker withheld pending estate resolution. And then, at the bottom, someone wrote in different handwriting, "Remove name per family instruction." The world tilted slightly. Remove name. Not add name later, not permanent marker pending. Remove. Do you know what that means? I asked. My voice barely steady, my hands clenched together to keep them from shaking. Marcus closed the notebook, his expression troubled. Young as he was, he understood what he'd found. It means someone wanted him forgotten, wanted him erased, like he was never here. I looked down at the flowers I'd brought, at the white roses already starting to brown at the edges where I'd touched them. 12 years of flowers. 12 years of marking a grave that was supposed to be unmarked, remembering someone I was supposed to forget. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for telling me." He nodded, started to walk away, then turned back. "Ma'am, if you ever find out who he was, I'd like to know, so I can update the records properly. I'll tell you," I promised, because I was going to give James his name back, even if I had to fight the whole town to do it. I went to the town hall the next morning, before I could talk myself out of it, before fear could convince me that some doors are better left closed. The building was old, red brick with white columns, built in 1923 according to the cornerstone. Inside, it smelled like floor wax and copy machine toner, and the particular mustiness of old documents slowly decomposing in their metal tombs. The floors were marble, worn smooth in paths where generations of feet had walked, seeking permits and licenses and records of lives lived and ended. The woman at the front desk, Mrs. Patterson, had worked there since before I was born. She looked up when I walked in, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Evelyn Briggs, haven't seen you in a while. Mrs. Patterson, I need to access the burial records." She raised an eyebrow. "Which ones?" 1962. She pointed toward a door marked Archives at the end of the hall. "Basement, second door on your left. Sign the logbook. Wear the gloves." The stairs creaked under my feet. Have you been through something similar? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every comment. It's important for us to know we're not alone. The handrail worn smooth by decades of hands. The basement was cooler, darker, lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed and flickered. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, each one labeled with year ranges in faded typewriter labels. I found 1960, 1965, and pulled open the drawer. It stuck, then gave way with a metallic shriek. Inside were rows of manila folders, each one labeled with a name and a date. I flipped through them slowly, careful not to tear the brittle paper. The gloves they'd provided were too large, made my hands clumsy. Adams, Barker, Collins, Davis, no Marshall. I checked again, slower this time, reading every label. Then I checked under Wright, under Briggs, under the first names I could think of. James, Marshall, variations, and possibilities. Nothing. My chest felt tight. I was about to give up, about to close the drawer and admit defeat, when I noticed a folder at the very back, shoved behind the others, almost hidden. It had no label. Just a piece of masking tape with the number H17 written in faded black ink. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Inside was a single form, typed on an old manual typewriter, the letters slightly uneven, some darker than others where the typist had struck the keys harder. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges. Name, redacted. Date of birth, April 14th, 1958. Date of death, June 11, 1962. Cause: respiratory failure, complications of congenital heart defect. Next of kin: redacted disposition, county burial, plot H17, Oakwood Cemetery. Marker: none notes, infant removed at family request. Name withheld per estate instruction, file sealed. At the bottom, someone had drawn a thick black line through the name field, pressing so hard the pen had torn the paper, leaving a jagged scar across the page. I sat down on the floor, the folder shaking in my hands, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. The concrete was cold beneath me. A water pipe dripped somewhere in the darkness. They hadn't just forgotten him. They'd erased him from the record, methodically, deliberately, with the full cooperation of the county, the church, whoever kept these files. And I was holding the proof. I went back to the grave that afternoon with a bucket of water, a rag, and a determination that surprised even me. Marcus saw me from across the cemetery and jogged over, curious, his boots crunching on the gravel path. "What are you doing?" "Looking," I said. I knelt beside the cross and dipped the rag in the water, wringing it out until it was just damp. Then I began wiping the wood, gentle at first, barely touching it, then firmer as I realized how thick the paint was. It was old, peeling in places, but thick where someone had reapplied it over the years, layer upon layer of white, trying to cover what was underneath. "Ma'am, I don't think you should—" "Help me," I said. It wasn't a request. He hesitated, then knelt beside me, pulling a pocket knife from his belt. "If there's something under there, we'll need to scrape, but carefully. Wood this old could splinter." We worked in silence, him scraping carefully at the paint while I wiped away the debris, the flakes of white falling like snow onto the grass. The wood beneath was dark, almost black with age and weather. For a long time we found nothing, just old wood, weathered and scarred. My knees ached, my back ached. The sun moved across the sky, and still we worked, scraping and wiping, like archaeologists uncovering something precious and fragile. And then, near the bottom of the cross, just above where it met the ground, Marcus stopped. "Wait," he said, his voice tight. "Look." I leaned closer, my heart pounding. There, carved into the wood, barely visible beneath the layers of paint we'd removed, were 2 letters, deep grooves, deliberate, carved with something sharp and with intention. J.M. I touched them with my fingertips, tracing the grooves. Someone had carved them deep, like they mattered, like they wanted them to last forever, like they were fighting against the erasure they knew was coming. "Jesus," Marcus whispered. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The words were caught in my throat, trapped behind tears that had been building for 12 years, for 58 years, for all the years this boy had been nameless and forgotten. I just knelt there, my fingers in the grooves of those letters, and let myself cry. Not quiet, dignified tears. Real crying. The kind that shakes your shoulders and makes your chest hurt and leaves you empty and clean. Marcus sat beside me, not speaking, just present. After a while, he said quietly, "Someone loved him. To carve that. Someone loved him enough to try to keep his name." "My mother," I said. "She carved it, and then someone painted over it." "Who?" "My stepfather, or someone he paid." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. They wanted him erased, but she tried to save him. Even if it was just 2 letters, even if no one would see them. We sat there as the sun moved lower, casting long shadows across the graves, across the names carved in stone and the name hidden under paint. Finally, Marcus said, "What was his full name?" "James Marshall Wright. He wrote it in his notebook, careful and clear. I'll make sure it goes in the record." I nodded, unable to speak again. Those 2 letters, J.M., carved in secret and covered in shame, but still there, still waiting. The old groundskeeper lived in a house 3 miles from the cemetery, a small brick ranch with a sagging porch and a chain-link fence that needed mending. I found his address in the phone book. Yes, I still had one, still trusted paper more than computers, and drove there on a Thursday afternoon, my hands tight on the steering wheel, rehearsing what I'd say. Leonard Petty was sitting outside when I pulled up, smoking a cigarette and watching the street like he'd been expecting someone. Maybe he had been. Maybe people who keep secrets their whole lives can feel when those secrets are about to break open. He looked up when I walked up the driveway, his eyes narrowing against the smoke. He was older than I remembered, smaller, his skin papery thin and spotted with age. "You're the woman with the flowers," he said. Not a question. "Yes, sir. Mr. Petty, I need to ask you something." He took a long drag, then nodded toward the empty chair beside him. "Sit." I sat, feeling the plastic webbing sag beneath me. "I found something," I said. "At the grave with the wooden cross, plot H17, I found initials carved into the wood. J.M. He didn't react, just kept smoking, his face unreadable. "I also found a record, in the town hall archives. An infant, buried in 1962. The file says the name was removed at family request." I paused, watching him. "Do you remember it?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought he might not answer. Then he exhaled slowly, smoke curling into the afternoon air. "I wasn't the main keeper back then. I was just helping out, mowing grass, digging graves, doing whatever old Mr. Henderson told me to do. I was 22, needed the job, couldn't afford to ask questions. But you remember?" "Yeah." He stubbed out his cigarette in a coffee can full of sand. "I remember that one. They brought the boy in a plain pine box. No service, no preacher, no flowers, just the family and me. Who was there? A woman. Older, maybe 45. Small, thin. Crying but trying not to, you know? The kind of crying where you're swallowing it down because someone told you not to. And a man, tall, angry looking. He's the one who gave the orders. What did he say? Said to bury the box without a marker. Said the child wasn't legitimate. Said the mother didn't want anyone to know." He lit another cigarette. I asked about a headstone. He said no. Said to leave it unmarked and not to talk about it. I felt sick. "And you just did it?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the weight in his eyes. The weight of secrets kept for money, for survival, for all the wrong reasons. I was 22 years old with a pregnant wife and rent due. "Yeah, I did it. I dug the hole, I lowered the box, I covered it with dirt, and I went home and didn't think about it again for 40 years. He paused. "But I never forgot the woman's face. Did you carve the initials?" He shook his head. "That was her. She came back a week later, maybe 2. Early morning, before anyone else was there. I was trimming hedges near the chapel, and I saw her. She knelt by the grave with a knife, just a kitchen knife, nothing special, and carved those letters. Took her maybe 20 minutes. Her hands were shaking so bad she had to stop and start over twice. Did you talk to her?" Asked her what she was doing. She said, "Giving him something they can't take away." Asked me not to tell, so I didn't. But someone painted over them. Not me. That was a few years later, maybe 65 or 66. The family came back. Different man this time, younger, might have been the woman's new husband, and painted the whole cross white. Said it looked better that way. Said it blended in. He laughed, bitter, like that was the point. Blending in, being invisible. I stood up, my legs shaking. "Thank you for telling me." He nodded. "You bringing him a name?" The question hung in the air between us. "Yes." "Good." He looked out at the street, at the ordinary afternoon, at the world that had forgotten a small boy named James. "He deserves one. They all do." I walked back to my car, carrying the weight of his testimony like a stone. Someone loved him enough to carve his initials in secret, and someone else loved their reputation more than his memory. But I was going to change that. I wrote the letter on a Saturday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and my mother's Bible open beside me. The Bible wasn't for inspiration. It was for courage, because inside it, pressed between Psalms and Proverbs, was the photograph of James. I'd put it there after I found it, like I was giving him a place in the family scripture, making him part of the story we told about ourselves. I wrote by hand first, on notebook paper, crossing out and starting over, trying to find words that were honest without being angry, clear without being cruel. Then I typed it on my old computer, printing it on good paper, the kind you use for resumes and important letters. To the town clerk, cemetery board, and records department. My name is Evelyn May Briggs. I am 64 years old. I have lived in this town my entire life. I am writing to request the formal registration and marking of Plot H17 in Oakwood Cemetery. The grave has been unmarked for 58 years. It contains the remains of James Marshall Wright, born April 14, 1958, died June 11, 1962. He was my half-brother, the son of my mother, Dorothy Wright Briggs, and her first husband, Samuel Marshall. James died of respiratory failure and congenital heart defect at the age of 4 years and 58 days. He was buried without a headstone at the request of my family, who wished to keep his existence private for reasons I am only now beginning to understand. I am requesting that the town correct this omission. I am prepared to pay for a proper granite marker and to provide documentation, including a letter from my late mother confirming his birth and death, a photograph dated 1961, testimony from Mr. Leonard Petty, former groundskeeper, who witnessed the burial. Cemetery records from your own archives showing Plot H17 as occupied. This is not about blame. This is not about exposing anyone or causing embarrassment. This is simply about truth. James Marshall Wright was real. He lived. He breathed. He died too young. And he deserves to be remembered as more than an erased file and a painted cross. I have been placing flowers at his grave for 12 years. For 12 years, people have laughed at me, called me confused, suggested I was mourning a stranger. They were wrong. I was mourning family. Respectfully, Evelyn May Briggs. I read it 3 times, checking for errors, checking for anger, checking to make sure it said what I meant it to say. Then I mailed it on Monday morning, walking to the post office with the envelope in my hand, feeling like I was mailing something more than a letter. I was mailing the truth. Claudette called me on Wednesday, furious. "You did what?" she screamed into the phone. "You wrote to the town? Are you trying to humiliate this family?" "I'm trying to tell the truth." "The truth? The truth is that boy was a mistake. Mama knew it. Daddy knew it. And now you're dragging his name through the mud for what? Attention? So you can feel like some kind of hero? For justice." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Justice? He's dead, Evelyn. He's been dead for 60 years. Let him stay that way. No. If you do this, I'm done. I won't speak to you again. I won't come to your house. I won't." "Then don't," I said, my voice steady, "because I'm doing this with or without you." She hung up, and I didn't call her back, because some bridges you have to let burn if you want to walk forward. The town approved my request 2 weeks later. The letter came on official stationery, signed by the clerk, the cemetery board chairman, and the mayor. They said they'd reviewed the records, confirmed the burial, and agreed to issue a permanent marker. The cost would be $800, payable in advance. I could choose the design from their approved catalog. I sat at my kitchen table reading that letter 3 times, making sure it was real, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. They'd said yes. After 58 years, someone had said yes. I chose simple. Gray granite, clean lines, nothing ornate or complicated. Just his name, his dates, and 1 line beneath, "Loved, though unnamed." Claudette found out the day before the installation was scheduled. I don't know how. Maybe someone at the town office told someone at church who told someone who told her. Small towns are like that. Information travels faster than sympathy. She showed up at my house unannounced, her car screeching into my driveway, her face red before she even got to the door. I was in the garden pulling weeds when I heard her shouting, "You're really doing this." I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. "Yes. Do you know what people are going to say? Do you know what this makes Mama look like? It makes her look human. It makes her look like a liar." She was crying now, angry tears that she wiped away roughly. "It makes our whole family look like liars, like we covered up a dead child, like we're monsters. We did cover him up, and maybe that was monstrous. He was a mistake, Evelyn." She screamed it, like volume could make it true. Mistakes don't get headstones. Mistakes get buried and forgotten, and that's what Mama did. She made a hard choice and she moved on and she gave us a good life. And you're throwing that away for a boy who's been dead longer than we've been alive. He wasn't a mistake. My voice was quiet, steady. He was a child, our brother, and he deserves a name. She stared at me, her chest heaving, her face twisted with something between rage and fear. "If you do this, I'm done. I won't speak to you again. I won't come to your house. I won't invite you to holidays. I won't—" "Then don't," I said. The words hung in the air between us. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to say it. Like she'd expected me to back down, to choose her over truth, to do what our family had always done. Swallow the hard things and smile. "You'd choose a dead stranger over your own sister? He's not a stranger. He's our brother. And you're choosing your comfort over his memory." Her mouth opened, closed. She turned and walked to her car, her steps sharp and angry. She got in, slammed the door, and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I thought she might change her mind, might come back. She didn't. She backed out of the driveway too fast, tires squealing, and drove away. I stood there in my garden, alone, my hands still dirty, my heart pounding. And I knew I'd made the right choice, because some truths cost you family, but silence costs you yourself. They installed the headstone on a Thursday morning in November, when the air was sharp and clean and the cemetery grass was still wet with dew. Marcus was there, along with 2 workers from the monument company, quiet men who treated their work with reverence. They removed the wooden cross carefully, setting it aside like it mattered, like it was sacred. And maybe it was. 58 years of marking a forgotten grave, 58 years of weathering storms and sun, 58 years of holding initials carved in secret. I asked them to save it. Marcus promised he would. They lowered the granite marker into place, adjusting it until it was perfectly level, perfectly straight. The stone was beautiful in its simplicity. Gray granite with a polished face that caught the morning light. I stood back, watching, my hands folded in front of me, trying not to cry, trying to stay dignified. When they finished, Marcus waved me over. The stone was perfect, clean lines, clear letters, no confusion, no ambiguity, no shame. James Marshall Wright, April 14th, 1958, June 11th, 1962, loved, though unnamed. I knelt down and placed a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums at the base, the same flowers I'd been bringing for 12 years. The same flowers I'd found pressed in my mother's Bible, dried and brittle, saved from some forgotten visit. Marcus knelt beside me, his presence quiet and steady. "You did a good thing," he said. I nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in my throat. Behind us, I heard footsteps on the gravel. I turned and saw Mrs. Henderson from church, the same woman who'd laughed at me all those years, who'd called me confused and sad and lost. She stopped when she saw the stone, her hand going to her mouth. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry." "No one did," I said. "That was the problem." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry I laughed. I know what you thought." She stood there a moment longer, then walked away, her steps slower, more careful, like she was walking on holy ground. I stayed a while longer, running my fingers over the engraved letters, feeling the grooves the way I'd felt the carved initials on the wooden cross, feeling the weight of 12 years lift, feeling the weight of 58 years acknowledged. James had a name now, carved in stone, recorded in the town registry. Real, remembered, claimed, and I had kept my promise. Not the promise I'd made to him. I'd never known him, never had the chance to make promises. But the promise I'd made to my mother in the silence after I read her letter. "I forgive you, but I won't forget him." Marcus came by the grave again the following Sunday, carrying his clipboard and a thermos of coffee, his boots leaving prints in the frost-touched grass. He saw me and smiled, that genuine smile of someone who understands that some work matters more than paychecks. "Thought I'd find you here," I smiled back. Old habits. He knelt beside the stone, reading the inscription again, like he was memorizing it. Then he pulled out his notebook and made a careful notation, his handwriting neat and deliberate. "I'm updating the cemetery map. Need to log this officially. Make sure it's in the system so it can't be erased again." "What are you writing?" He held up the notebook so I could see. Plot H17. James Marshall Wright. Born April 14th, 1958. Died June 11th, 1962. Permanent marker installed November 2020. Formerly unmarked by family request. Status corrected by next of kin, Evelyn May Briggs. He read the name aloud as he wrote it, his voice steady and clear, giving each syllable weight. James Marshall Wright. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around us, carrying the scent of earth and rain and something else, something that felt like release. I closed my eyes and listened, feeling something inside me finally settle into place, a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there until it lifted. For 12 years, I'd brought flowers to a grave without a name. I'd endured laughter, judgment, whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. I'd dug through records and fought my own family and chosen truth over comfort. But now, when the groundkeeper read his name aloud, it felt like the wind changed direction. Like James could finally rest, and so could I. I stood up, brushing the dampness from my knees. Marcus offered me his hand, and I took it, letting him pull me to my feet. "Thank you," I said. He shook his head. "You did the hard part. I just wrote it down." Someone had to write it down. That's how things become real. He nodded, understanding. I picked up my purse and walked toward the cemetery gate, the late autumn sun warm on my face, turning the frost to dew. Behind me, the stone stood firm, the name carved deep in granite that would last longer than memory, longer than gossip, longer than shame. James Marshall Wright. Not a mistake, not a secret, not an erasure, just a boy who lived and died and finally got the dignity he deserved. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. At my age, I don't bring flowers for the dead. I bring them for the truth. And the truth, once spoken, doesn't need defending. It just needs to stand. Like a stone in a cemetery. Like a name that won't be erased. Like the memory of a boy who was loved, though unnamed, until someone loved him enough to give him back his name. I walked out through the cemetery gates, and for the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel like I was leaving someone behind. I felt like I was bringing him home. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.